Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar with the Hire Community. I've got my lovely guests below who I will give a chance to introduce themselves very, very, very soon. But before we get started, it's always nice. Drop us a line. Let us know where in the world you are joining us from. Very apt for this conversation because we will be talking around TA leadership in a global world. I'm in sunny London in the UK. Finally sunny. I'll ask my guests where they are. Josh, whereabouts are you?
Hey, I'm calling from Tbilisi, Georgia today.
Very nice. And Hira, how about you?
So I'm in Pakistan right now. Very
Amazing.
sunny.
Yeah, oh God, I'd say so. I mean, this sunny day in London is quite unique. We've had okay weather the past few days, so I'm hoping that the weekend might be the first glimmer of summer before it ends. But yeah, do let us know where else you've dialed in from to watch us today. Just I guess a little bit of an intro for anyone who might be new here, or maybe you have followed us and watched several of our webinars. But my name is Kelly McGrath-Smith, so I am the Community Director here at Hire. And for those of you maybe who don't know, if you are new, the Hire Community is a free-to-join global network of internal TA and HR folks. So we've got over 10,000 people globally at the moment in our network, which is amazing. So we typically have our community conversations over in Slack, but we also have webinars weekly, such as here, and we also have in-person events as well. So do join the community if you've not already. What I'll do is I'll just pop a little, I was going to say a link below. I feel like an influencer. But if you haven't joined, it's hirehq.com and you can sign up and join the conversation. We'll also have these webinars on replay in there as well. So if you wanted to listen and watch back or share with anyone, you can absolutely do that as well. So I guess a little bit of oh, we've got a comment. So we've got Mark joining in sunny Surrey. Yeah, we've got some sunny vibes in the UK today. We don't know what to do with ourselves when it's sunny here. I feel like just want to be in the park. I should have done this webinar from my garden, but it might be a bit loud. But as you can see from our lovely banner here, so our conversation today is really looking at this kind of global perspective of working in TA and HR. So we're going to talk about how leaders can really navigate managing distributed teams. We look at common challenges and strategies to overcome these as well. So what I'll do at this point, it's enough of me talking. I'll hand over to the panelists to introduce themselves before we do a proper dive into the webinar itself. So Josh, how about you? Maybe you can give us a little bit of an intro and background to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Very excited to be with you guys here today. So my background, I've got about 10 years in the talent acquisition, people and culture, HR space. And I crossed a lot of different industries, restaurants, recruiting agencies, and startups. And over the last 2 years, I've had the pleasure of being able to be a part of building out the team and kind of the hiring, training, onboarding practices, performance management, everything here at Remote Year. If you're not familiar with Remote Year, we're a travel community that provides 1, 4, and 12-month travel programs for digital nomads around the world. Yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And Hira, how about you?
So yeah, I'm here. I am a senior people partner at Omnipresent, which is an employer of record. We enable employers to hire and effectively manage their workforce in a globally distributed manner. And I have been in HR for over about 10 years as well. And I've been in mostly corporate sector starting up. And then last couple of years, I've been in startups, which is very different from the corporate sector and completely remote environment. So yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here.
Amazing. Well, I feel like we've got two the best people to talk about remote work and global working with both of you here as well. So I think maybe just to kind of set the scene a little bit for anyone who's joined us. we tend to have a lot of conversations over in the hire community around lots of different topics, but one that often kind of pops up, especially lately, is kind of looking at things like global ways of working. And we all know that the world of work has changed a lot since COVID. There's a lot more people who are either in completely remote first companies, or maybe now there's a return to the office for some folks, and we're looking at managing, distributed teams. So maybe you've got some of your people who you see day to day in maybe your London office, and maybe you're also managing teams in the US or Europe. So it brings about, different ways of working, different ways that, managers have to adapt with their teams as well. So we thought that this would be a really interesting topic to explore, and also looking at things like how you can get people to really feel part of the culture if they're, completely remote, or if we're looking at kind of those distributed teams where maybe you're not getting that face time that maybe we were more used to a few years ago. So maybe to begin, a place to start the conversation is looking at, what are some of the fundamental practices that managers might want to put in place when actually managing distributed teams. Hira, I'll pass this to you to start with, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing your thoughts.
Of course, thank you. I mean, it's quite in a globally distributed team, and especially in a remote or a hybrid working environment, some of the very important things that managers can actually put in place, or a business can put in place, is about perfecting the onboarding process. Like, how do you onboard your employees is very, very important. Your onboarding is your first impression to an employee when they join the organization. So I think it's really important to kind of focus and give time. I think we often don't give a little bit of time to get ourselves used to of the new companies. I think one of them is big ones is onboarding processes. Then getting to know your team members should be part of that onboarding process, because a lot of times in a remote environment, you don't meet people. So you don't have that in-person interaction, or you can't pick up the cues from people when you, like you would in an in-person environment. In a remote environment becomes even more important. So having those people where you can give them space to meet different stakeholders is very, very important. The other one is prioritizing communication. We all get really, really busy, and you have a new team member starting a new team. You already have you're a leader, and you already have about 10 people in your team. You kind of feel that, okay, they can pick up communication, people will communicate with them. However, it's very important to kind of prioritize that communication so that you are spending time communicating with them. So these are the top three that I feel that leaders should focus on when they have a distributed team or a new team member starting in their team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, I know as well, it would be good to hear your thoughts, but I know in particular, and we spoke about this before, that onboarding piece as well. I think that's something that you're pretty passionate about yourself, but anything that you want to kind of add on to what Hira was saying?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny, my notes kind of mirror exactly what Hira's words were. I think like part of that onboarding process, like she talked about being so important, it's making them feel a part of a team as soon as possible. And through that, a lot of it is like casual, like just meeting the other people on the team and establishing like a camaraderie that you would have naturally had if you were in the office, right? Just getting to like shake hands or hug or however the greetings go in the country you're in. Being able to have that in a virtual way is important. But then I think like the expectation setting to me is one of the most important parts. And that can be like one, just like what's the training process and what success looks like in that first month on the job. But then it can kind of feed into what she was talking about as far as communication. It's like, this is how we communicate at X company. And this is the calls you're expected to be on, the working hours you're expected to keep, kind of all those things that really set the parameters of like, okay, this is like what a typical week looks like. And then I think relationships, like just as a whole, are really important. Getting to know the people beyond just like the work that you're going to be doing together, and getting to know like their interests and things like that, so you can find ways to engage kind of naturally like you would in an office.
And that's a really interesting point as well. I think, I guess we can sometimes call them like water cooler moments, which are very easy to have, in person. You might be like, oh, right, will we go for a coffee? But actually, sometimes trying to replicate that in a remote world requires a lot more thought and effort. Is there anything that maybe you've done or you've seen done that has kind of helped from that kind of water cooler cultural perspective, help new hires settle in from that piece?
I can go on that one. I was waiting for you. So, yeah, I think we've tried a few different things at Remote Year specifically, and I think like the important thing is like just to keep trying things until something catches, right? One of the first things we do is we plan out like people that you're gonna have one-on-one calls with in your first couple of weeks on the job. And the agenda of those calls is just to like get to know each other. Like it's not work specific at all. But we've also done like a myriad of other things. So one of the things that I've enjoyed the most is having team members teach about things that they are experts in. That it doesn't necessarily have to be work related, but it could be. So we had recently somebody do like an hour on how to navigate Excel and like build out formulas and stuff like that. And that was probably the favorite of everything we've done because everyone's like, oh, this saved me like 10 minutes today by just knowing this, right? But then we've also had somebody on our marketing team who's great with photography do a session on like how to capture pictures with your mobile phone. And people loved that too, right? So I think it's just trying to get to know your people and what their interests are, and then finding ways to bring them together and where they can get to know each other. Sorry, last thing I guess I could say is we've also recently started building out project teams. So trying to bring cross-functionally so that you don't feel like necessarily siloed on, tech or marketing or whatever team you're on, because you get the chance to come together and really have that cross-functional connection.
Nice. I like that kind of piece around what you're saying, that actually those, we'll say, little presentation or workshops, they don't have to be really work specific. So actually that kind of invites people to share whatever maybe is personal to them. Like you said, actually someone brilliant at Excel. Oh, I feel like I should have been invited to that one. I feel like we can all be better at Excel. Hira, how about you? Is there anything to add to that, I guess, from that perspective of nurturing that culture piece within that onboarding time?
So I'm going to steal that one, Josh, first. The one you just said about, people learning from each other. I think it's a really great idea. But I think something that we do at Omnipresent is quite neat, is about, it's about talking about yourself. So we throw them out some questions about what makes you think, what's your favorite food, those kind of things. And it will just automatically go on to our team chats feed, and people really enjoyed that. And it was like, oh yeah, I like doing that too. Or I'm a hiker, or I love swimming, or these kind of things. So those are the things, kind of like small intro pieces that we had done at Omnipresent, were really, really neat, I thought, which was the first time I did it, actually. And another thing was, after a couple of months, we kind of asked people to do a bio on them, something about them that they would like to share with the whole business, and that would go onto our blog site. And I think that was really, really interesting, because when I started, I did one, and then I read a lot of other people's, and it was really inspiring. And it kind of gives you perspective on who they are, where they've come from. So, and it's really important, I think, in the remote teams, is to understand where people have come from. Because if, I'm based in London, so if I were to go into the office in a corporate environment, everybody would be probably from London or around, in and around London. Whereas in a globally distributed team, people come from all different walks of life. So I think it humbles you at the same time to see that. So I think that was one of the really interesting things that businesses can do, is, after a couple of months, get people to share something about themselves that, they're happy to share, and put it on for their teams to see.
Yeah, that's lovely. I really love those ideas. I feel like there's probably so many things we could take from this, and we could all kind of implement each other's various strategies. I guess kind of maybe moving slightly away kind of from that onboarding piece. So we've kind of covered that kind of new joiner. if you're looking at, that sense of maybe managing either like, a more established team. So you might have someone who's new joining you, or you might have people who've been there a while. Maybe we can talk around, the challenges that you can face when actually you're working in a company that is globally distributed. And actually, Hira, you kind of touched upon it there, but actually, working with various people in various countries, they'll bring about kind of different cultural nuances as well as different hours of working. So maybe we can chat through, some of the kind of key challenges that maybe you've experienced or that you've seen kind of within your time as well. Josh, I'll hand this to you to start with.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like the key challenges, because I mean, there's so many in a remote or hybrid world, right? But I think one of the most important ones that probably is a challenge a lot of people have faced is having like clear KPIs for your team, and like each person feeling like they understand how they contribute to like the overall KPIs of the business. I know we've found that to be something that's really important and that people ask for. So just like outlining that and making sure it's a conversation where people do understand it. If they're not sure, being able to ask questions. And then I think another really big thing is just like making sure that your employees still have a way to feel heard and like their opinion is valued. And like in a remote team, you don't necessarily have that same opportunity to just like pop in your boss's office anytime during the day, right? And so one of the things that we've done at Remote Year through that is try to build out like a really good one-on-one practice with the people and culture team, so that we can hear, kind of the concerns, the feedback. We also do like a bunch of different surveys that we send out, but we try to holistically really capture the voice of the employee and then take that to our leadership team to say, hey, I think we need to make these changes based on what people are telling us. And I think maybe that's the last part to really like take away as well, is that like, I think often as leaders, we feel like we need to know everything, but the people on our team have ideas of how we can change things that would make it much better. And like we had something, one of the guys on our team gave me a handful of recommendations about how we could streamline our organization of Slack across the team. And I was able to like ask him some more questions about it, implement that, and then it made everything a lot smoother for the whole team. So I think that's important too, just to know that you don't have to have all the answers, and you can ask your team or ask other people in the same world out there and other companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the kind of things that I'm hearing there is there's a mixture of kind of having that structure piece as well. So you've got that kind of clear expectation settings of the I was going to say the ATS, the KPIs, getting all of my letters mixed up. And then you've got your one-to-one sets. So actually you're empowering, managers are empowered no matter where their team members are. They've got this kind of set practice in place of actually how to best run a one-to-one. And then that other piece you were saying around actually listening to your team. So having surveys, having feedback loops where it is almost like a consistent iteration in terms of how that works. Hira, is there anything from your side from, I guess, that challenge perspective when you are working in a globally distributed company from a management perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the key challenges here is cultural differences and barriers. I feel that was one of the very important ones, because in a globally distributed team, people will come from different places, different countries, and the way they handle a problem is very different from how you would handle in other places. So if your leaders predominantly sit in like North America or European countries, it's going to be a certain way to handle those problems. And if you have a your team sit in APAC region or other regions, there'd be a huge cultural difference there. So it's about learning about your teams, and the cultures is one of the important ones I think that managers often miss. And at the same time, when you do have remote teams all across the world within different time zones, one of the things is that how do you spot those well-being issues? How do you spot when people are not feeling 100%? And you know, I often see leaders not being able to see them, not because it's not intentional, it's just because it's hard. You know, your 90% of your cues are nonverbal, and if you can't pick up on those, and if you don't know your team and you don't talk to your team enough, or people in your team, you're not going to be able to see if they're any different from the week before. So I think this is the one of the important ones that I feel that managers, leaders in hybrid or remote working environments should be quite focused and well aware of.
That's a really good point. And I think so when it comes to that well-being piece, because I know actually here we spoke about this kind of, I think when we first met as well, like how can managers become better at, you know, being able to spot those signs, or almost setting up that, I guess, psychological safety with their direct reports, so that, you know, no matter where in the world you are, if you never have, you know, in-person FaceTime, they're still creating that relationship and that space to understand their team's like well-being perspective. Is there anything that you might advise, or maybe that you've tried that worked really well here?
I think allowing time for small talk. So in the meetings, when you do have a one-to-one, do ask about them. Do ask about, you know, the family, what's happening in your country, what's happening in your town. You know, the world is filled with so much information and news we often don't realize. And you know, in some country there might be some crisis happening that you may not be aware of yet. So allow time for that small talk with your direct reports when you do. That way you'll get to know what's happening around them, and if there's anything that would impact them. Another thing you could also do is share your own vulnerabilities. You know, what is happening in your life that is I'm not 100% this week, or I'm not, you know, I'm 80% this week because of, you know, a child not being well, or something happening in my town, there's a flood, or there's something. I think it's important to share your own vulnerabilities as well, so that people, you know, it's a human, same level of interaction. So I think those are an important way where you would create that psychological safety for people to be able to share those things. If you're going to keep it very, professionalism is obviously very important, but if you're going to keep it very, very stick to agenda, then people may not feel like, okay, I don't know if I can talk to my manager about it. So it's important to share your own stories.
Absolutely. So it's almost that piece of, you don't want every one-to-one to feel transactional and KPI related, because then I think if someone does have something going on with them, it can be harder for them to even bring it up, because it almost feels like they have to put in a separate meeting to say, hey manager, this is what's going on with me. And that can feel quite a big thing for someone to do, especially if they're newer in the company and they're not sure, you know, of their manager, for example. And I guess around that piece as well. So, you know, I think what we can sometimes find with global teams is you might be managing some people in person and some people remote for some companies. And I think what might be good to chat a little bit about is, you know, how do you kind of have that balance between, you know, some employees maybe seeing you face to face and some employees not? Because obviously, you know, if you are face to face, you might be able to actually meet that person for a coffee, have small talk, and, you know, it's creating almost that fairness as well. Is there any kind of tips or strategies that you might be able to share for those folks who are managing, you know, hybrid teams where they've got some remote and some in the office? Josh, I'll hand to you for this one if there is anything that you wanted to share.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, it's really just trying to make space for both types, and like our hybrid is a little different than most in that our whole team's remote, but then we have team members that are physically located in cities that we take our clients to. So they still kind of work remotely in terms of like the overall team, but they have to stay in one place. But yeah, like we try to make the same opportunities for connecting remotely for everybody. And then in my role, I try to travel around and see as many people as I can each year, which it's impossible to go to every city. But I would just say, like, keeping a pulse on both. And if you need to kind of make separate initiatives to both parts of the organization, do that, but also just try to make sure that it's fair and that you are making time for both, on-site and remote employees, because they are going to notice if you're doing one for one side and not for the other, right?
Absolutely. And here, is there anything you would add to that?
I think re-looking at your company culture. Your company culture has to go beyond an in-office traditional parties. So being able to accommodate those people, you have to create virtual environments. And what I think is, very similar to what Josh said, Omnipresent is a remote company. However, we've got pockets of employees in countries where they would come together and work from a co-working space. And manager every now and then taking up, if you've got a big team in Madrid or Spain, in Madrid or any other parts of Spain, you bring them together and you maybe once in a while take that time to go, like Josh said, to go and meet them. And I think that creates that personal relationship, personal connection, which is important in today's environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe like on that cultural piece kind of wraps in quite nicely to our next piece around the startup world, because obviously we know startups are quick, they're fast paced, it's about getting everything done yesterday. So how do managers actually balance setting up culture in their teams with business needs to move quick? Josh, I'll hand this to you to kick us off.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because I think, like, sometimes in a startup world, like, a company can put culture at like the bottom of the list because it's like, oh, there's so much else we need to do. But I think when they do that, it's because they don't realize it's simple things that they can do that will, like, add to that culture and make it a priority. And so for me, like, those things, like, the first is just making time for your people. So for me, my philosophy is kind of always like, a person that reports to me, like, if they need my time, I make time for them. That's the first priority, no matter what. And hopefully that trickles down so that everyone at the company feels like whoever they report to, like, when they need time, they can always get it, right? Like, if that means I have to take a call at 11 o'clock at night, that's fine, because I want to make sure that I'm giving that person everything they need to be successful. And then I think, like, doing the little things, like here I mentioned earlier, it's like making time on meetings to talk a little bit about personal life, even if you're really busy. Besides that, it's really, like, to me, in the startup culture, it's keeping a pulse on your people and, like, keeping track of when they took time off. If somebody hasn't taken time off in 6 months, then it's like, it doesn't really matter how busy you are. If their cup's not full, like, if they're on empty, they can't fill up anyone else's cup, and you're not going to get the same production from them as you would if you gave them a week off and then they came back fully energized. So I think those are kind of the main ones for me.
Yeah, amazing. And Hira, how about you?
I think looking at your values as a company, what are your values? One of our values at Omnipresent is we are ambitious. So what does that mean to people? We've got people who've got high performing teams, efficient teams, and obviously when there's high performing teams, they are highly demanding as well from the other side. You demand lots from them, and they'll demand lots from you. So actually looking at, as a startup, is what our goals are, and often in startups, goalpost keeps moving. Yeah. So, 3 months ago, what was true is no longer true anymore. But it's about bringing those people on board at the same time. So keeping them informed of changes happening, and it's important. And a lot of times startups are not for everybody because everything changes so quickly. So it's about recognizing that what is people's own ambitions as well. So making sure you're aligning them and bringing them on board all the time is one of the key ones that I think is important for a startup to succeed, because often things will change and people will not find out about it. and that is really demotivating. So communicating, showing, celebrating success, and also recognizing failures where you didn't get it right. So that those are the things I think are important in startups environment for people to, because we don't have much time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess on that side, are there any I guess initiatives that either of you have rolled out for remote culture that maybe is worth sharing, that maybe some other people can take inspiration from? Josh, I'll go to you for this one.
Yeah, I think on this note, like startup specific, like one of the things that's been most helpful for us because we are moving quickly is that we have a short, like 15 to 20-minute meeting every week, just to give updates and try to give like full transparency of like where we're at. If a goalpost has moved, like what changed, why. That way the whole team is kind of like in the loop and aware. And I think like kind of on that same note, like Hira was saying, you're asking a lot of people, they're asking a lot of you as well. So it's like, we mentioned earlier kind of that feedback loop. Like we try to have that every week through that meeting, but then also trying to make sure we recognize, anyone that has gone above and beyond on a weekly basis, because, a lot of us, like, I think as human beings, if we are working extra hard, like we want to be told, hey, thanks for that hard work last week, like you did a great job, right? And then yeah, I think aside from that, it's just really like giving the reason why when you do need to make those changes, because they do need to happen all the time in a startup, right? But it's like explaining, giving a little bit of context, and then people are like, oh, okay, great, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And here, is there anything you would add to that from an initiative perspective?
I think looking at your tools, what kind of tools are you using? Doing a sort of check every few months to see whether these tools, because I know startups, I mean, when I moved from corporate to startup, it was a huge difference because the startups used a lot of tools, collaboration, communication for different reasons. Whereas in corporate tech, there was a lot less tools, much more mature, but a lot less. So it's about seeing that, okay, does this work for us still, or doesn't work for us anymore? So really investing your time and money on the right type of tools to collaborate, I think, is one of the important ones to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think sometimes there's almost too many tools and you're like, can we consolidate this? How can we make this work? And I think maybe moving on to our next topic, so looking at more kind of fairness and equity. So when you're looking at this from like a global team perspective, so how can managers, ensure equity across teams? Hira, I'll start with you on this one.
Clear expectations. I think Josh said this from, one of the very initial comments he made was actually setting some clear expectations. Is what do you expect from each role? I mean, you have your performance frameworks, you've got your career growth frameworks. So making sure that they are applied across the business. So when you do a performance management or an evaluation or a feedback, it's important to base that on those frameworks, because then that's applied to everybody. And obviously, different teams will have, a product team will have a different career growth framework, and a engineering team or a commercial team will have a different one. But it's about making sure that they connect back to your values, and they're across the business, and everyone's going to be evaluated based on that. Is how you would create that equitable environment. Giving managers training on how to use those is very important, because often managers will have something, but they wouldn't know what that actually means, what does good look like, right? So it's important actually for people teams to invest that time and show them that this is what our growth frameworks look like, and this is how we're going to evaluate you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, anything to add to this from your side?
I would definitely just second everything Hira said. But then I think, I think for me, and I can kind of tackle part of the question Rebecca put in the chat along with this. So we have, I think, 30 different nationalities represented on our team at Remote Year right now. And so I think like understanding your team, if you're in people and culture, if you're, a member of leadership at your company, understanding your team and like the differences and trying to best understand the different cultures represented on your team as you can is important so that you can understand, what is different acceptable norms per those different cultures, and then just making sure that everybody feels heard and seen and has what they need to be successful in their roles. And then in terms of kind of what happens when conflict arises, because it does, I like to talk about the collision of culture that happens at Remote Year, because we have 30 different nationalities on our team, but we also have 90 different nationalities that have joined our programs as participants. And so it's going to happen always. And so we always say, you can't control if what you do or say offends someone else, but it is your responsibility to apologize and learn from it. And so being the person that's trying to understand like the perspective that everyone's coming from, then I'll typically in those scenarios try to bring each individual together for a call to talk through it and give them each a chance to kind of say their piece. And then typically it's a scenario where maybe they don't know each other that well. And once they understand the perspective of the other person, they kind of come to a point where they agree, they both learn from it. So for us, I think that's it. It's just kind of like trying to encourage a mindset of seeking to understand, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then here I've popped Rebecca's question just here so we can see. Is there anything that you would add in terms of an answer for Rebecca?
The culture and DEI training is very important. But now, as a business, what does that mean to you? You have to kind of go back to the drawing board and say, what does our DEI policy means to us? Are we just looking at our unconscious bias? Are we looking at inclusivity? What does it mean to us? And diversity and inclusion is a journey, and it's different for every business. So you can't really replicate what another business is doing, because you'll have different set of people and your values and your agendas are different. But it's quite important to kind of set that from the beginning. Is that what does, and bring your leaders on board with that, to say to them, what does DEI mean to you? What DEI means to me in Europe may mean something different in North America. But it's about bringing those leaders on the table and saying, and I think it's important for people team to kind of ask that question, challenging question from the leaders, to say, what does it mean to you? What do we stand for? Is it about gender pay gap? Is it about, different races around the world? And how do we train those people? So start that from the beginning, and then see what kind of training. There's lots of trainings available, on these, how to hire better talent, how to manage talent, how to be equitable in a remote environment. But what's important is, what do we want to do? Mm-hmm. And I often ask that leaders is that, what does DEI mean for us? And for a lot of people, it's very important, because that actually connects them to the organization. So it's important to get that right.
Amazing. Well, on that note, if anyone does have any questions like Rebecca, please do pop them in the chat. We'll have some time for Q&A, so if you've got any questions, thoughts, observations, do share it with us. I guess before we kind of wrap up, one thing maybe to kind of end with is more from that kind of developmental perspective, when we look at developing people, and how managers can actually really look at this, holistically when they are working in distributed teams, managing people globally. How do managers start to, I guess, have, maybe sometimes difficult conversations, or maybe conversations where, they've spotted something in someone and they really want to support them in their development? Josh, I'll pass to you to start us off with this one.
Yeah, I think this is a topic that I love, because I think in most organizations, the idea is like, I have to develop people so that they'll stay in my organization. But like the reality is that I think it's like the average time people spend in a company right now is like 18 months, maybe. And so like your people are going to leave. And so like I always want to take the approach and the mindset of like, okay, how do you want to develop as a person? And like, let's learn that. Like, what do you want, your career to look like? And then can we make that happen here? Or if we can't, like, at what point does that mean we help you transition to somewhere else? And I think that's a really difficult thing to wrap your brain around sometimes as a manager, to think that like I might develop someone so that they can leave and like not be on my team anymore. But if we take like more of just a human approach of like, I want this person to be as successful as they can be, then it makes sense. And if we do take that approach and we can do it in a way that like holistically works, then also they're going to let us know when they're ready to leave and give us like an ample amount of time, maybe even help us find the person to replace them. And it's all going to flow really well. So it's an ideal world. It doesn't always work out, right? But that's kind of like my best case scenario and approach. It's like understand what your people want and then try to help them develop as much as you can. And when you get to the point where they're like the goldfish that's too big for your pond, help them find a bigger one.
I love that comparison. That's a really nice visual as well. Hira, do you have anything to add from that kind of developmental piece?
I think it's really important thing that Josh has highlighted is that people are going to leave, but you want them to be ambassadors of your company. So how do you foster their learning and development? And one of the ideas that I think I learned very early in my career when I was working in learning and development was embracing social learning through learning communities. So, just because people work remotely doesn't mean they have to learn remote, in isolation. So about seeing what kind of, there are people who are really good at Excel or really good at PowerPoint, and there's other people that can learn from them. So creating those communities within your business, and giving people free will to choose from them. It's an informal social learning environment, but where people can actually learn from each other. And I think one of the things I learned was informal and formal learning. And I think one thing was great about informal learning is that you drive it. You ask people what they want to learn and how they want to learn, and you can create your communities based on that. Some people like to build. We've got a lot of engineers who are very good at building apps and codes and things like that. Create a community for them and get people to join it. I would love to learn a code. There are people who are complete whiz on creating, beautiful PowerPoints, or storytelling is their forte. Create a community for that. Let other people learn from those things. We can all learn a thing or two about, how to tell a better story. So it's about recognizing what people's interests are and creating smaller groups of them to learn together.
Amazing. I love that. The power of community as well, when you've got those distributed and remote teams as well, is really important. So like I said, do pop any comments, questions before we wrap up. I feel like this was such an insightful session and really useful for either current managers who are managing, distributed teams, or potentially new managers as well, because, different companies have different ways of working. And I think if you find yourself always been in person and all of a sudden you're in a more remote setting, it's always good to kind of revisit conversations like this to draw some inspiration from as well. So what I'll do is I will pop a little banner down here. So this is just the little link to join Hire. So if you are new, it is an internal community for internal TA, HR folk. We've got about 10,000 growing members globally at the moment. There's lots of kind of specialist interest channels as well. And it's a really good place if you do find yourself, for example, in a remote or distributed environment, or maybe you're kind of a standalone HR or TA leader. This is a place where you can have conversations like this with peers, and actually have a little bit of, I guess, like I was going to say a brain dump, but I feel like there's probably a better way to say that. So just to have those kind of remote conversations with people and draw some inspiration and help you along your way as well. Next week, we have another webinar coming up. So this time we have got a panel discussion. So we're all kind of looking around from funding rounds to IPO. So how to actually set your TA team up for growth. So we've got Ben, Louise and Jocelyn joining us, and it'll be hosted by Phil. So do join us. So that's next week, same time, same place. So you can sign up via LinkedIn, and it'll be over LinkedIn Live as well. I've just got one question for us before we wrap up. So we've got a question from Rebecca saying, with so many communication tools and platforms, which do you find most effective and also for best communication? So here, I'll put that to you first, since you were kind of talking a lot around tools.
Yes, tools, my favorite. I love tools. But again, I wanna say to them that, you know, we at Omnipresent, we use Slack, we use Lattice, we use many different tools to communicate or do our one-to-ones. Again, think about how you want to communicate with people. I say tools fatigue is real. It's so, and obviously in terms of money as well, it is commercially thinking, it is expensive to have these tools implemented. So really think about what your company, how your company wants to communicate, whether they want to do it through Slack, whether they want to do it through video conferencing, Zoom. It's important to make sure that the tools that you use are fit for your organization at all times. So do a tools audit. You know, do we still use these tools? Do we really want to use these tools? Are they fit for purpose for these teams? Then make those decisions. There isn't an ideal tool for a company. But it's about, you know, it's personal. Is what does your company, you know, can use and can effectively bring it for people.
Amazing. I feel like if there was one ideal tool for every company, they would be making a fortune. Josh, do you have anything to add to that from kind of a tools and effective comms perspective?
Yeah, I think what I would add is just your process and training for how you use those tools at your company is going to be what makes the tools like the most effective for your organization. You can have any tool in the world, but if you don't have an understanding of like, this is how we use this tool at Remote Year, at Omnipresent, at Hire, wherever, then it doesn't matter. You know, we use Slack and Google Suite mainly for everything, but we realized how we were using Slack. We hadn't trained some of the newer team members, and the older team members knew how to use it really well. And so until we actually cleaned up and reorganized Slack and did a training for everyone, it wasn't an effective tool. So it's not like one tool is just going to save the people of your team. It's the tool plus the training plus how you organize it.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Well, this has been an amazing, brilliant conversation. It was great to see you both again and have this chat. We will, you know, be having this as a replay, so you can always share with people if they've missed it. Equally happy to continue the conversation over in the Hire community as well, if there's anything that you wanted to kind of pick up further. But other than that, thank you both so much for joining, and hopefully enjoy the rest of your days, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Bye.